Welcome to the Electronic Schedule Training DVD. The purpose of this DVD is to educate all employers on the submission of schedules electronically. To make possible the submission of schedules electronically, the National Insurance Scheme has created a Microsoft Excel file which will be used to generate the electronic schedule. The older manual system, which used a hard copy mode of submission, was plagued with difficulties such as incorrect submissions, missing submissions, and time-consuming data entry, which was prone to human errors. The new electronic system eliminates these inconsistencies and ensures that the correct data is used to populate the National Insurance Scheme databases. This new system uses a soft copy mode of submission in the form of a text file which generated from the Microsoft Excel file provided in this package. For employers with automated payroll systems, please refer to the Electronic Schedule User Manual for instruction on creating the text file to the specifications of the National Insurance Scheme. The first phase in this new form of submission is the data cleansing phase. Employers should first open the N.I.S. Cleanup Input Excel file, ensure that the macros are enabled, then populate the sheet with the required information regarding their company and the staff members. After populating the sheet, the employer is expected to create text file button to generate the employee list in the form of a text file. Save the text file in a location which can be easily referenced and close the pop-up box which indicates that the file has been successfully created. The employer is then expected to email the text file to the National Insurance Scheme via email address webmaster@nis.org.gy. The National Insurance Scheme will then match the data on that list against what is stored on their database in order to highlight any inconsistencies. In the event of a name or NIS number mismatch, the National Insurance Scheme will send an error report via email to the employer stating the error type and the corresponding employee. The error list will contain the error type and also what is stored on the National Insurance Scheme database. Should you determine that the error resides on the database of the National Insurance Scheme, it is expected that you have the employees check with our records department and produce the relevant documents in order to have their records updated. Should the error reside on your database, it is expected that you do the corrections to your database after the relevant verifications have been done. After the data cleansing phase is completed, the second phase is the submission of schedules electronically. Chapter 3601 of the Laws of Guyana states, the board may, if it thinks fit and subject to such terms and conditions as it may impose, approve any arrangement whereby contributions are made at times or in a manner other than those prescribed in these regulations, and such arrangement may include provision for the payment of such fees as may be determined by the board to represent the estimated additional expense in administration to the board. And the board may, if it thinks fit, and subject to such terms and conditions as it may impose, as a condition of authorizing the payment of any contribution at a date later than that upon which the wages for any part of the period in respect of which the contributions payable are paid, require the making of such deposit of money by way of security as may be approved by the board. These regulations shall, subject to the provision of any such arrangement, apply to any person affected by the arrangements, and in contravention of or failure to comply with any requirements of any such arrangement shall be deemed to be a contravention of or a failure to comply with these regulations. Since June 2013, the national insurance contribution rate has been increased from 13% to 14%. The employer contribution has increased from 7.8% to 8.4%, while the employee contribution has increased from 5.2% to 5.6%. With this in mind, the government of Guyana has decided to provide a 1% subsidy for employees with basic earnings of $50,000 and below for the monthly paid, and $11,538 and below for the weekly paid. As such, these employees will continue to pay at a rate of 13%. However, employees with basic earnings of above $50,000 will pay the full rate of 14%. In order to facilitate two categories of contributors, two versions of the Microsoft Excel file had to be created, the above schedule and the below schedule. The above schedule, which calculates deductions at a rate of 14%, is used to remit contributions for employees with basic earnings of more than $50,000 for the monthly paid and $11,538 for the weekly. The below schedule, which calculates deductions at a rate of 13%, is used to remit contributions for employees with basic earnings of $50,000 and below for the monthly paid, and $11,538 and below for the weekly paid. When populating the electronic schedules, employers should first open the electronic schedule above or below Excel file and ensure that the macros are enabled. The procedure to enable the macros may vary depending on the version of Microsoft Office used. For Microsoft Office 2003, you should see a security warning at the top of the sheet. Click Options, then Enable Content and click OK. Employers should then populate the header section of the file, the gray area, with the required data. To the top of the Excel file, there are 6 required fields. Name of employer. This represents the full name of the employer. For example, Quartz Guyana Inc. Registration number. This represents the registration number assigned by N.I.S. to the employer at the time of registration. For example, 44444. Contribution year. This represents the year of contribution. For example, 2007. Contribution month. This represents the contribution month. For example, the 4th of April. Schedule type. This represents the payment period. M equals monthly. W equals weekly. Date period. This represents the period of contribution and should be entered just as in the example: year, month, day. To recap, the following 6 fields represent the header information: name of employer, registration number, contribution year, contribution month, schedule type, and date period. The details of the Excel file are as follows. Employee N.I.S. number. This represents the employee N.I.S. number given by N.I.S. at the time of registration. For example, B11366648. Employee surname. This represents the employee last name given at the time of registration. For example, Carter. Employee first name. This represents the employee first name given at the time of registration. For example, Alexander. Wages for period 1 to 5. For monthly paid employees, only the first wage period will be accessible. For weekly paid employees, the wages for period 2 field and onwards will be accessible. In entering the wages, decimal points should be avoided. It is expected that you round off to the nearest dollar. All other calculations will be done automatically. For the employer contribution on the below sheet, This represents the amount paid by the employer and is calculated automatically. For employees earning $50,000 and below between the ages of 16 and 60 years, this should be 7.8% of insurable earnings. Otherwise, 1.5% of employee insurable earnings on that sheet. Employee contribution on the below sheet. This represents the amount paid by the employee and is calculated automatically. For employees earning $50,000 and below between the ages of 16 and 60 years, this should be 5.2% of insurable earnings. Otherwise, there should be no deductions on that sheet. For employer contribution of the above sheet. This represents the amount paid by the employer and is calculated automatically. For employees earning $50,000 and above between the ages of 16 and 60 years, this should be 8.4% of insurable earnings. Otherwise, 1.5% of employee insurable earnings on that sheet. Employee contribution on the above sheet. This represents the amount paid by the employee and is calculated automatically. For employees earning $50,000 and above between the ages of 16 and 60 years, this should be 5.6% of insurable earnings. Otherwise, there should be no deductions on that sheet. Note: please be reminded that employers are expected to submit to the scheme the employee's total actual earnings, not just the basic earnings. Also, for employers with both categories of employees, above and below, two separate Excel files will have to be populated. Hence, two electronic schedules will have to be submitted. After the sheet has been completely populated, employers are expected to populate a summary schedule known as the CS3. There are two categories of this file. There is the CS3A and the CS3B. The CS3 file is a PDF document and is editable in the soft copy format, making it easy for employers to populate it right on the computer. For the above sheet, the CS3B will have to be populated, and for the below sheet, the CS3A will have to be populated. After populating the electronic schedule Excel file, the employer should click the Create Text File button to generate the electronic schedule. Save the electronic schedule file for submission to the National Insurance Scheme. Use summary totals in red to populate the CS3A. Print out CS3 in triplicate. Submit to the Finance Department the electronic schedule along with the CS3 and payment. The preferred method of storage for the electronic schedule text file for submission to the National Insurance Scheme is that of a designated flash drive. The flash drive will remain in the possession of the National Insurance Scheme until the electronic schedule has been uploaded. A stamped copy of the CS3 will be returned to you as receipt of payment. This stamped copy of the CS3 should be presented when returning to uplift your flash drive. Should there be any error in your submission, for example, a typographical error on your part, an error report will be stored on the flash drive for your correction.